Welcome to the Salesman Podcast, where we interview the world's leading influence, body language, psychology, and sales experts to give you the information you need to close more deals and make more money. Additionally, for sales humor, tutorials, and entertainment, type salesman.red into your browser and come visit the world's largest community of millennial salespeople today. This episode of the Salesman Podcast is sponsored by Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com allows you to sell smarter and faster from anywhere in the world with the world's _1 CRM system. Close more deals, get more leads, and make more insightful decisions today by going to salesman.red/Salesforce to get started. Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Salesman Podcast. I'm your host, Will Barron, and on today's show, we have Buki Mosaku, and we're discussing results-oriented appointment making and essentially how to reach that elusive C-suite to sell them your products or services. We start off discussing cold calling, and Buki gives us opinions on whether it still works or not, and then we get on to things like social media and breaking out of obscurity with your prospects, which is generally the hardest thing in the sales process to do. Buki is the founder of Inquire Management, which is a corporate development and sales training consultancy company that helps salespeople and professionals in large, medium, and small companies generate more prospects, close more deals, and grow existing business. He's worked with Shell, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, a whole bunch of companies. All the links we mentioned in the show are available at salesman.red. And without further ado, let's jump into today's show. Hi, Buki, and welcome to the Salesman Show.
Thank you, Will.
You are more than welcome, sir. And today we're going to talk about results-oriented appointment making, because I feel like it isn't focused. The actual making the appointment isn't focused on enough in the world of sales. And obviously, if you fail at that point, or if you're not successful at that point, you're damaging your closing opportunities at the end of the line. And at each point that you've got a percentage of people that you're going to lose or that you're going to convert, becoming more skilled at the front is going to lead to a more dramatic end of your pipeline. So let's talk about cold calling. It's something I'm a fan of. I know a lot of people hate. Do you think from an appointment making setting that cold calling is dead with the email, or do you think that there's still room for people to be cold calling to set appointments?
Oh, no way is it dead. It's live and kicking. It's live and kicking. The problem is that there are a lot of people out there that don't know how to cold call, and as a result, they get into the habit of making tons and tons of calls without much success. And then the situation is compounded because with the growth of social media and alternative ways of generating business, it's in the interest of a lot of the experts in that world to dumb down cold calling, to really talk it down. And there's no reason to do that because the two go hand in hand. And we love cold calling at Inquire. We love it. Okay,
so when you say it's in the interest, do you mean from a perspective of they can be experts in that, so that's what they promote, versus that there's a real practical benefit to it?
Yeah, so, there's one expert out there who's great, but his business is based on how bad cold calling is, and I'm not going to knock his business because he's got a great business, and he talks about using alternative tools such as Facebook and LinkedIn. But cold calling works. The problem is most people don't know how to do it. And the model he's referring to is an old model. This model of calling hundreds and hundreds of people is not efficient cold calling. Effective cold calling is understanding your ratios, targeting what you're doing, and increasing your effectiveness as a result, as opposed to blindly calling, hundreds and hundreds of people. And the effective ones among us do it in such a way that it's a very straightforward way of driving the pipeline and increasing productivity in order to close more sales.
For sure. And that, to me, that gets me excited, because if other people aren't doing it, it's just increasing the opportunity and the prospects of you doing it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's great. Let the guys who aren't good at it, leave them. And learn to do it the right way, and you'll just distinguish yourself. Cold calls only sound cold because most people can't do it. I love that. the few of us that can do it, we get a lot of success as a result. And we're opening FTSE 500 accounts, and we're closing lots of business. I mean, I think 75% of my business has been generated via cold calls, and these are FTSE 500 companies. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan. I could go on. I hope I'm allowed to say their names.
Oh yeah, of course.
Many of them. Using these tactics, we've been able to open these accounts. Now, of course, combining it with social media is incredible, and that just expedites the pace. But let's not say that cold calling is dead. It's just most people can't do it.
Okay, well, I want to come on to the social media aspect of this, because combining the two sounds interesting to me. So you mentioned the importance of cold calling to your business then, and people generally suck at it, and it's a skill that you have to learn, and there's a certain mindset to it as well, that you've got to be comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
If you're scared on the phone, then it's not for you, or you need to not be scared.
Yeah.
But let's just touch on the actual cold call itself then.
Right.
So how would you go, or what would be your steps of, you want an appointment, you want a face-to-face appointment with a customer to sell them and present to them? What's your process for that? Would you just cold call them after you've done your research and use that as an opportunity to set up the face-to-face? Or would you do what it seems a lot of people are doing, but I'm not sure if it's a necessary step, of email the person to set up a phone call, then phone call them, then get the face-to-face? How would you go about it?
So you can email them, but I don't advise it. There's been a lot of research into this, and the results have shown that you're actually no more better off by emailing than actually calling a company direct. What actually happens, it makes some people feel more comfortable in doing it. So if that makes you feel better, then go ahead and do it. But to be honest, they know you're calling, and as a result of that, in many cases, they will put up barriers to stop you from getting through, because they know you're going to call through as a result of the email. What I'd rather see people do is make the call. Yes, do your research, but have a structured approach to making the call. And one of the biggest challenges in making the call is that people don't use what is traditionally called scripts. Now, I don't mean a long-winded script. I mean an internalized approach which allows you to focus on the appointment so that you can listen to the objection. A lot of people are too busy trying to defend why it makes sense to meet with them instead of just listening to what the person says. Yep. And you can't do that unless you have an internalized approach, which is not wooden, but which is conversational. And so we teach that.
Okay, well, let's start on the structure, and then we'll come on to the internalized script, because everyone does things differently, and I know you've got a lot of knowledge to share in this area, Buki. So what is I guess is the question, is there a general structure that a cold call should have, or does it depend totally on the situation?
Everybody has their own environment, and I can't speak about everybody's environment, but I can give you a general approach. We talk about what we call an ARA model. A stands for attention, I stands for identification, the R stands for reason, and the A stands for ask for the next step. And I think as a basic call structure, that is extremely effective. There are variations to that. I mean, we talk about 5 or 6 different approaches that we talk about in our workshops and programs. But as a basic structure, that ARA model works very well. And the key is to focus on the meeting. Focus on the meeting and a specific date and time, as opposed to the alternative close of Tuesday or Thursday, because people tend to respond in kind. So if you give a person a specific date and time, what happens is that they focus on that time and they see if that's free. And if it's not free, then you can offer them another time. And suddenly now you're talking about when you're going to meet, not if you're going to meet.
Yeah. Well, I think people's brains, even if people aren't lazy, people's brains are inherently lazy. So if you can do a bit of the processing for them of this date, does it fit in your calendar? Let's do it. It's done. Then it takes some of the pressure and processing power off them, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I totally. People like, salespeople, the salesman today needs to be a leader, and people like to be led. And you need to lead them in a nice way, comfortable way, but still need to be led.
So people might at first hearing of that take a bit of a step back, but I think people generally like to be led. We're all social creatures.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to remember that, you are, how can you put it? I guess you're representing your company and your product and your service, and you as a salesperson at this point should really believe in what you're doing and believe that the customer or the prospect at the other end of the phone is going to get massive value out of what you're saying. So you should be comfortable in calling yourself a leader and influencing them into the meeting where you can give further value.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with constrained enthusiasm, people follow. People follow the leader. It doesn't mean bullying, but it means, leading them. A leader will look to you to suggest to them what would be the ideal next step. And I think we have to take that approach in cold calling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned at the top of the show linking all this with social media. So I don't do this. If I cold call someone, I'll generally cold call. If I don't speak to them, I'll leave a voicemail. Perhaps I'll email them as well, just as another nudge, because sometimes if you're dealing with CEOs or people higher up the food chain, they might be in a meeting where they can quickly email you back, but they can't get on the phone, for example.
Yes.
But I've never used social media to follow up. So tell us more about that, Buki, and how social media can fit into this conversation.
Yeah, well, I think LinkedIn creatively can be used to follow up. Obviously, there are different ways in which you can speak to people directly on LinkedIn. And of course, if you have industry expertise, there are ways in which you can creatively leverage that industry expertise in order to gain attention. And you can do this on the phone, but you can also do it using LinkedIn. Really powerful. And then, of course, there are things like, having, depending on how deeply you want to go in, having your own blog, giving information on specific sectors or specific areas which are relevant to key decision makers in specific sectors. All of this starts to build up your reputation and makes you the go-to guy, so to speak, in terms of your specific field. And that resonates with key decision makers when they're making a decision as to who they should be with and them taking a call from you. So you can combine the two strategies together, and it can significantly increase your productivity.
For sure. I love it, Buki. So in the whole concept, and this, I'll ask you a question in a minute, which I usually leave to the end of the show, but I'll ask you now.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I feel that sales are changing, and I feel like what you've just said of if you've got a blog, if you can break this barrier of obscurity and the prospect knows you before you cold call them because they've interacted with you on Twitter or LinkedIn, or they've seen your blog, or they've gone to you for different things that you've done of research or whatever it is, you're obviously instantly in a massively higher standing before you even get on the call.
Exactly.
So from that, Buki, and you're speaking my language here totally, where do you think sales is going over the next 5 years or so? Do you think all this is going to become more prevalent? Do you think that salespeople will have their own reputation, which perhaps has just been in the past, has just been with the network, but now it can be physically seen online through number of followers or number of emails and all that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Where do you see salespeople in 5 years' time?
Yeah, well, I think speak to any sales director, and they'll say, I like to see my salespeople as having their own business. I want them to reach their targets by owning their own, seeing their territory as their business. And I think increasingly, unlike before, salespeople will start to create their own business within a business. So you'll start seeing people having their own blogs, even websites in some cases, where they become a business within a business. Because that's the most effective way for them to communicate online and offline at the same time. So I think increasingly we're going to see the salesperson as a franchisor, if that's what a franchisee of their company, and combining the two, the offline and online opportunity more effectively.
Do you think, so that's an interesting point that I've not really thought about before, but do you think that they would become a franchisee of the company, or do you think it would be what happened in the media a couple of years ago of what was happening was the writers were becoming as famous and having as big a following as the brands that they were representing, so they went off and did their own thing, or become more like hired guns rather than employees, which really pissed newspapers off.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really powerful and useful change because it meant the writers were no longer kind of edited so much, perhaps. They could speak their mind a bit more. What do you think is going to happen with sales? Do you think people are going to be still owned by the companies, or do you think that you'll be a salesperson who represents a company, perhaps?
Yeah, I think they'll be less owned and more representative of the company, or representatives of the company who are sort of stars in their own right. I mean, ultimately, they're still representing their company. But you can see this with a lot of industries, in broking, insurance broking, for example, some of the large corporate risk brokers. The salespeople there basically have a book, they run that book, and they're known by their clients. And the salespeople are becoming stronger within the top ones are becoming stronger within these organizations because they're the face of the organization. Yeah.
For sure. I love it. You're absolutely speaking my language, and I predict exactly the same in the next few years. I think that change is imminent. So coming back to appointment making now then, what do you think is the hardest part of appointment making? If you could put your finger on one thing that's the most difficult bit, that it has the most leverage if you get it right, what do you reckon that would be? Yeah,
the key is turning around that first objection and having a systematic approach to doing it. Again, I talk about the concept of planned spontaneity, because when you speak to people, they say, oh, I don't want to sound like I'm reading from a book. And of course, you shouldn't sound like that. But I think you can internalize your approach, because one of the biggest challenges in cold calling is that first negative response. Now, if you can turn it around, then you can get into more of an extended discussion. But the problem with most people is that they fall at that hurdle because they're not able to turn it around, or they see it as such a strong response, when in reality, it's a knee-jerk response. So if you can turn that around, then you can get into an extended discussion, because when you turn around that first initial response, the prospect will always come up with a justification for the response. And when they give you that justification of that response, they're giving you an insight into their world. And once you understand that, you can give them a reason to change, which is what sales is all about.
Okay, so that first hurdle, and I agree with you here, I think this is something that I think people give up too easily sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you think that people are giving up too easily because they're not, for want of a better word, like ballsy enough? Because you're almost confronting it, aren't you, sometimes?
Yeah.
Or do you think that, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Do you think that first hurdle, do you think people just aren't willing to put up with that confrontation to get past it? Or do you think that or is there a method of doing it? That's what I'm trying to ask.
The problem is that most people don't practice. See, if you practice it and internalize your approach, it'll sound conversational. It won't sound like you're challenging. You don't need to fight with people to get them, to say something sensible to them and get them to respond. One of my challenges with The Wolf of Wall Street, I think people love that for the wrong reasons. I love that film. But one of my issues with that film is that where they're showing the the main protagonist, whose name I've forgotten, I shouldn't. But
Jordan Belfort.
Yeah, when they show him cold calling, he's bullying the prospect. Prospect. Now, the fact of the matter is, you don't need to bully the prospect. You just need to have a response. A calm, practiced, I would suggest, response, which is flexible based on what the person says. Once you get that, you can turn it around. A lot of people are scared of that because they just don't have an approach. So we give them an approach of doing that. Once you have an approach and you can turn it around, the person must respond. Either they'll respond or they'll put the phone down, and they very rarely put the phone down. They'll usually respond. And once they respond, as long as you know your product, you know your environment, you know your solutions, you can give them a reason to change.
Yeah, that knee-jerk reaction for most people is just an automatic barrier that goes up.
Yeah.
And I think most people are almost endeared and want you to succeed once you get past that, because you're shown that you're not just some schmuck cold calling from a call center that doesn't really know anything, which I think is a lot of people fear, don't they, when they pick up the phone and it's someone that starts pitching them.
Yeah, and it suddenly becomes an intelligent call because you're informed. Your next response is based on what they said to you. And so it's less of a cold call and more of a warm call, because now you're talking about something which they've told you. And it becomes very difficult for them not to meet with you or to go to the next step. And if they don't, you know what, for the ones that don't, it's okay, because you're never going to get everybody. I think we're conditioned growing up. We're conditioned to be, afraid of speaking to people. We're all told don't speak to strangers. And this stays with us until we're very old. And then it becomes difficult when a person, when first of all picking up the phone to make the call, and then secondly dealing with the response. But like I say, having a plan, I call it planned spontaneity, having a planned approach where you structure out your approach and you don't try and remember every single objection that everybody can give to you, because you're not a mastermind. You're not a memory expert, right?
Yeah.
You just have a planned, systematic approach which allows you to turn around the initial response, and once you can turn around that, stop and listen to what they say. Don't throw up all over them. Listen to what they say, and then give them a reason to meet with you.
Good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, so what happens when they don't answer the phone and it's the voicemail? There's lots of different methodologies for this. What are your thoughts on it, Buki?
Well, here's the thing. You must leave a message. Now, every time I'm doing a workshop, when I say leave a message, people go, there's no point. Why should I leave a message? I leave a message, they'll never call me back. I'd rather just keep calling them. But you could be calling somebody else. And here's the other thing. If you don't leave a message, how will they know that you've called? So you've got to leave a message. So then the question then becomes, well, what type of message are you leaving? So you have to leave an effective message. And there are many of them. We go through at least 6 different ways of leaving a message. But there are a number of different ways in which you can leave a message. I think you should leave a message. And it could be regarding powerful messages, for example, could be regarding companies that you're doing business with that are in a similar sector. You don't have to give the whole story, but you just need to say enough to arouse curiosity. And that usually gets your call back, even if it's from a PA. And then that's a different way. There's a different way of handling that. Yeah.
If nothing else, just the psychology and the different triggers involved of the person hearing your voice.
Yeah.
And then when you call them again, you've got a little bit of familiarity there, which you didn't have before. So, it's definitely worth doing it from that perspective alone.
Yeah, I think so. So I think people should leave voicemail messages. And and give them time to call you back as well.
How long is that? Because that's a really interesting point that I've never thought about before.
Yeah.
So for some people, it could be a day. If you're trying to touch base with CEOs, it might be that they literally have to get their PA to schedule your phone call into their diary. So it might be weeks. How often or what regularity would you recommend following up?
Well, again, I think this is about industries and environments. It can change. Yeah. So if you've got a big universe, 1,000, 10,000, if you've got a big universe, then I would suggest leave a message and wait a week before you follow up with that person. Call somebody else in the company, by all means. But if it's a senior CEO, C-level person, give them a week. And that way, goodwill is retained. They don't feel that you're a pest. And when you call up, there's almost a feeling to a degree from their perspective that they're sorry for not calling you back. And you can create, people laugh, but you can create that type of scenario. Then if you're in an environment where you don't have a big universe and decisions need to be made quickly, otherwise a solution that you're selling is outdated and it can't be sold, then obviously you're in a slightly different scenario. So then you have to vary it. But again, leave time. If the decision has to be made in a day, there are some industries, some products, some solutions where people have to buy in a day. Leave a couple of hours between the calls. Don't call every 5 minutes. Leave a couple of hours between the calls. So it really depends on your sector, but I would say where you have a large universe, wait a week and call somebody else in the company.
Okay, so we've covered getting on the voice of a person on the phone. If they don't answer and you get a voicemail, what about gatekeepers now?
Yeah.
This is something that, do you know what, I've never really had a problem with, of if I get a PA, just have a nice chat, and usually I can get through, and there's no structure to it, there's nothing to it other than, well, I don't want to sound big-headed, but I'm reasonably personable, if you know what I mean. I can just have a conversation, and then generally the PA is there to stop people pestering the executive versus to stop all calls going through most of the time.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help anyone who's having trouble with this whatsoever. It's totally anecdotal, but from your perspective then, Buki, what would you recommend when you do get a PA on the phone?
Well, I think you called it first. I think the first thing is just be nice. You've got to be nice. You can't take it out on them. We can't start getting annoyed at them for doing what is their job. So we have to be, we have to be nice. Don't shoot the messenger. We have to be nice. We all screen our calls. We need to understand that they're doing their job, and we have to be nice. So the first thing is, any way in which you can build rapport, be nice, and then be nice back to you is a good idea. However, as we all know, being nice is not always enough. And so there are many different things you could do. You could leave a message with regards to a company that you've worked with in the past. You don't have to go into the full story. Just leave a message with regards to that company. Usually...
is it better not to go into the full story? Because I imagine if the PA then tries to tell the executive, they're going to pitch it poorly most of the time.
Yeah.
So is it better to give them a small amount of information just to pique the interest that can be, I guess you've got to think about what can be translated through a layperson?
So you could do that. But like you said, they're probably not going to give it in the right way. But here's the other thing. If you think about it, if we step into the C-level person's world, they probably have tons of people trying to get through to them. They have a lot of people trying to get through to them. And usually what happens is that the PA will write either on Outlook or on a note the name of the company, the reason for the call, etc. So if you keep the reason short and to the point, usually that'll be passed on to the CEO on a slip, or a pink slip, a yellow slip. It'll be passed on to them, and they'll see it and they'll make a decision. But if you give them too much information, what can happen is they'll start to evaluate and say, oh, it's somebody trying to sell me something, and then it becomes, then the likelihood of them or the probability of them calling you back is reduced. We go into this in a lot of detail in our workshops, and we show alternative ways of doing it. But I think brevity is better than longevity in this type of scenario.
For sure. Just make that succinct point that can be passed on.
Point, leave your number, and usually they'll call you back.
Good stuff. Okay, Buki, well, we're coming up to about time, and there's a bunch of questions that we ask everyone who comes on the show, so I want to run through some of these. The first one, who do you think the world's greatest salesperson is?
Now that's a good question. That's a good question. And I'm not going to give you a traditional answer. I'm not going to give you the. There are many sales experts out there who I could suggest, but I think the best salesperson is Muhammad Ali.
Wow, God.
Yeah, I think Muhammad Ali is the best salesperson because he combined a lot of things which allowed him to move nations on his side when it came to his many different fights, both actual fights and philosophical fights as well. So I think belief. He had belief.
Yeah, I was going to say belief. There's loads of videos. I'll link to one in the show notes of this episode, and there's one particular one where it's obviously rehearsed and recorded, but he's pretending he's doing it on the fly, and I guess being prepared is another point to that.
There you go, yeah.
And he's just rattling out all these amazing, basically poetry, and he's blowing minds as he's doing it, but you can tell that he believes that he's going to win.
Yeah, and we talked about leadership. I mean, what great leadership when you're enthusiastic in a constrained manner, although he wasn't so constrained. What happens is that people follow you. They follow you. When you talk to people and they say, why did you, at least when I do, and I say, well, why did you choose us as opposed to the other company? You expect them to go into some detailed reason, and usually they just say that you seem to know what you were talking about. Yeah, you seem that, you seem like the kind of person we would like to work with. And that's because they're following. They have you have the quality of leadership, and an element of charisma, which allows people to follow you. And I think Muhammad Ali had that in spades, in buckets. So,
amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great answer. That's probably the best answer of the recording so far, so great job.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next one. What's one book that you'd recommend to the upgraded salesman audience?
Again, I'm not going to give you a traditional book because we've all read the books, like The Greatest Salesman in the World, and there's many different books I could mention. But so I'm going to give you something which is a bit obscure. It's not a traditional sales book, but I think every salesperson would benefit if they could, if they had the time to listen to it. And this is something called The Secret of Deliberate Creation. The Secret of Deliberate Creation. And it's by Dr. Robert Anthony. And it is one of the most powerful books I've read in my life.
Tell us a bit more, because it's not something I've come across.
No, most people wouldn't have come across it. Sales is changing. People need to sales is always, I say sales is changing. People are understanding more about performance now in a way which they didn't previously. And The Secret of Deliberate Creation is all about understanding understanding the conscious and the subconscious, the battle between the conscious and the subconscious, and how that impacts your results. There are a lot of salespeople out there who have big targets, and they want to not only get the big targets, they want to get even more, and they want to have massive, huge commissions. But the problem is they can't smash the targets in the way that they would do because there's a battle between their conscious and subconscious minds. And until they really understand that battle and understand how to win that battle, you really can't change your performance in any significant way. So you can do all the tactics, cold calling training, closing training, negotiating, presenting, all these things, but they won't really have a major impact unless you can get your subconscious in alignment with your conscious thinking. And Dr. Robert Anthony is a master at this and goes into this in great detail. And if you really, really, really want to take your business or your sales to the next level, then I strongly advise that you take the time, because it's not a quick read, quick listen. You take the time to buy that, and it will shift your performance exponentially.
Amazing. Well, Buki, you're definitely going to come back on the show and do an episode with me on the subconscious, because I'm totally on board with you. The first book I read on all this was The New Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz.
Great book.
Yeah, that sounds like a similar kind of thing to what you were describing then, and that made some real big shifts in me. And I think a practical example of what we've just talked about, because if you've not read these kind of books and you've not got a background in science or psychology or anything like that, it can sound a bit woo-woo.
Yes,
and
exactly.
A real practical example of this is that most people earn between plus and minus 20% of what their parents earn, and that's due to the way you've been brought up and all the little cues and different things that have been told to you and your subconscious over time that forces you to think in a certain box.
Yes.
And if you want to smash targets, generally what you've got to do is increase the barriers of what you think that you can earn and what you're comfortable earning, because people have a fear of success, which again sounds ridiculous, but your subconscious is potentially saying, well, if you earn all this money, you might not be able to hang out with these friends anymore, or you might need to do this, and there's lots of different things going on. So, Buki, you're definitely going to have to get you on for another episode to talk about this.
Oh, I love it. I could talk about it for hours. I love it. It's a battle. There's a battle going on. So all the salespeople should know. I mean, hopefully they do know, and managers, I think it's important. There is a battle with the subconscious and the conscious, and the subconscious has proof that what's been happening is correct. And so, winning that battle is very difficult. But it's not about skill. It's not about will. It's about the subconscious, and it's understanding how to master that. So I'd love to talk to you about it in another call.
Amazing stuff. Well, I've got one final question for you today before you tell us a little bit more about your company, your blog, and the workshops that you're doing. And it's something I've asked everyone who's come on the show so far, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become a better salesman?
Okay. Now I'll give a more traditional answer, but I think this is something that people just don't do enough. I think people don't ask for referrals. I would ask for more referrals. Build referral generation into your arsenal of techniques. And I love saying that because I support Arsenal. You must ask for more referrals. And can I give you one more?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, the other thing that I would do is ride the momentum. Something, really ride the momentum. When things are going really well, don't celebrate too hard. Just ride the momentum, because you're in your ideal place, and you need to ride the momentum until you physically can't do it anymore. And I think if I did more of that, I would be even more successful.
Amazing stuff. Well, Buki, I know that you're doing some free workshops, and then I want you to tell us about them, and I want you to tell us about your blog and everything else that you're doing as well.
Yeah, we have a blog, and we're all about sharing sharing sales knowledge, our take on it, what we take from other organizations. Our objective in life is to help clients, salespeople get more prospects, close more sales, and grow existing business. We have I have a free ebook on that called Fast Track, but also which you can get on my blog or you can get at my site. But also we have a number of free workshops. We're doing these all around the world, but we're starting in London, and these are in the city, and these are focused around how do you get more out of your people by managing them more effectively from a sales perspective. Also, we look at the subject of cold calling as well in one of them, which is all about get more meetings, close more sales, and we look at it from a salesperson's perspective and a manager's perspective, and how to create an environment conducive to driving appointments, as well as the tactics for doing it. And these are filling up very quickly, but we do have a number of free sessions coming up. So if you go to the site and you put in your details, we'll let you know all about them and how you can get there, and you can book your place.
Awesome stuff. And that's over inquiremanagement.com, right?
Yes. Inquire awesome with an
stuff. I. And we'll link to that in the show notes at upgradedsalesman.com. And with that, Buki, I want to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank you for coming on the Salesman Show.
Well, it's been a pleasure.